Imagine that you get to work in your genius all the time and you get so used to it that just doing a little bit of work, even in your competency, you're like, oh, I can't, you know what I mean? You can get probably spoiled and suddenly just having to do something that you don't love can start to feel like a huge burden. That would be a pretty bad thing too. Welcome to the Working Genius podcast, where we discuss anything and everything having to do with the 6 types of working genius and how it impacts your work and your life. I'm Pat Lencioni, your host, joined by Cody Thompson, my co-host out in Utah. How's Utah today, Cody?
Beautiful. Yeah, we're having a good summer out here. Not a lot of rain, but beautiful evenings. Hard to beat Utah in June and July.
And that's going to be our topic today is summers in Utah.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
Or we're going to talk about something else. What is the title of this?
I think we called it Beyond the Coffee Cups.
Yeah, Beyond the Coffee Cups. You know, we love the analogy. And I think our second episode of the Working Genius podcast, we talked about this, that when we think about getting joy and energy from different kinds of work and doing things, the coffee cup analogy we decided is a really good one. And that is your working genius is like pouring coffee into a Yeti mug. What's a better brand name than that? Is there another one now that people talk about?
I mean, I think everybody copied them. You name a brand and they all have a Yeti mug. Yeah.
Right. So you screw the lid on after you pour hot coffee in it, and it retains its energy, its heat, right? And so you can open it up 3 hours later and it's still hot. That's amazing. It's a miracle. And that's your working genius. Your working competency is, like, for those people watching, is like this coffee cup in my little hand here, where you pour coffee into it and you put the lid on it, plastic lid, and it's going to stay warm for a half hour. You know, it's going to hold its heat for a little while. You can do that work and not get totally drained. Your working frustration, of course, is the coffee cup, that we drill a little hole in the bottom of this cup and pour coffee into it, and it drains out almost immediately. So working frustration can mean almost immediate, just, I've lost joy and energy.
I've actually seen you on a meeting pick a hole into the bottom of your teacup and it spill all over your pants. So it's pretty appropriate. Yeah.
Many times. So we just wanted to have a good conversation here, a little brain candy conversation. It's interesting. We like to have fun with Working Genius and talk about the coffee cup analogy, because we've come up with a few little nuances and other examples of it that we thought would be fun to talk about. And people who listen to this podcast, they tend to, really be interested in the nuances of this, and they're using it in their work. So we thought it would be fun to talk for a while about Beyond the Coffee Cup analogy.
Yeah, and Pat, I think it's interesting too when, Working Genius is 4 years old. And as often as we go back to the way we described it in the beginning and why we chose the words that we chose. And I think the coffee cup analogy was one of the first ones that we were trying to communicate the way that it talks about joy and energy and fulfillment. And so it is kind of fun to think about, like, 4 years later, would we change it? Is there a better analogy? What nuances, have we explored that, would add to the conversation, not necessarily replace it? And we've heard from people, that are certified, and from our master facilitators, different ways that they've communicated it to teams. So we just thought it'd be fun to explore those and say, like, what are ways that people are kind of understanding or being using creative analogies to describe working genius?
Exactly. And so let's start by adding something to the coffee cup analogy itself, Cody, which is, and I think you mentioned this when we were talking, is that there's actually coffee cups that are plugged in that actually make the coffee. You got one right there.
I've got one. If you're on video, yeah, a little ember mug, and you can just turn it on and it will heat up your coffee.
So you can actually get additional joy and energy. It's not just that it holds it, but it can grow the joy and energy. And certainly that's true in Working Genius. Sometimes, as you said before the podcast, Cody, some people have never had a chance to work in their genius. So when they get to do that, it's like, I don't even know how to relate to this. This is better than I could have imagined. So there's that upside. We took it up. Doesn't just go to a 10, it goes to 11.
Well, I think that's one of the important nuances, like the thread that we were pulling at as we thought about this conversation, because the question was really, is it something like, another analogy would be like a phone battery, right? Is Working Genius like you're plugging in your phone, and that the more work you do in your Working Genius, does it actually get fuller? Like, does it fill up? Does it get charged? Does it charge you? And we talk often about that, but is there a limit to it? So in other words, that was one of the threads we were trying to pull in our conversation to say, well, let's say you were just organizing your life to work exclusively in your geniuses. Is that like you're 100% charged if you can somehow manage to work in there 100%?
Ooh, I like this analogy. Because at some point the phone is charged all the way and it says, hey, it's not taking anymore.
Right.
And I've even heard that, is it true? I'm a cretin, that if you overcharge it, that's not good for it.
I mean, probably. I have
Tara,
no idea.
who's considerably younger than me, is nodding her head now and said that's true. And so there is something to be said that we can only go so far in this. Most people never get to that point. But here's another thing. We've talked about, is it good to only work in your geniuses? And I say, no, I think we need to do other kinds of work to appreciate it. And imagine that you kept your phone plugged in and you never disconnected it and walked around with it. Well, that's the whole idea. It's portable. And so we're meant to use it. We're meant to drain the batteries sometimes. And just knowing that we can go and fill it up again is a good thing. Now, I don't know what the other one would be, like maybe leaving it on, leaving the flashlight on, turning up the sound and the brightness all the way and just draining it without using it. That would maybe be your working frustration.
Well, I think it's like when it gets to low power mode and it just shuts off some of the basic functionalities, right? Like, oh yeah, you're in deficient battery mode, which means that like all of your features and functions are not operable. But I do think, I think that was a really important nuance that we were talking about, Pat, is like, is does it recharge you? And I think what you mentioned about our conversation earlier is so many people are probably working enough in their competencies and frustrations that when they realize that they are geniuses is a sort of a different category of work, it would feel like you're getting charged up, right? Like you spend so much time not working in joy and fulfillment that once you start to articulate what that is and organize your life in that way, it can feel like, yeah, this is, of course, it's recharging.
Yeah. Wow. Something that just occurred to me, Cody, as you were saying that is, imagine that you get to work in your genius all the time and you get so used to it that just doing a little bit of work, even in your competency, you're like, oh, I can't, you know what I mean? You can get probably spoiled and suddenly just having to do something that you don't love can start to feel like a huge burden. That would be a pretty bad thing too.
Yeah. The, Tracy thought of another analogy that I thought was super helpful around riding a bike, which is the idea that if you're riding a bike downhill, on an incline going down, that it's very easy. It comes so easy. It's almost a thrill to be able to ride downhill. That would, be equivalent to your working genius. Riding on a flat surface is like, yeah, I can do this. This is a working competency. Like, it's not quite as thrilling as it is, and it requires a little bit more effort to stay at speed. That's your working competency. And then the riding a bike uphill is more like your working genius. And we have a hill in our neighborhood, so we have a little loop that we do as a family. And every time my son decides, Dad, I'm going to ride my bike on this loop, I know that it means halfway up the hill, I'll be carrying 2 bikes between my kids. Like they just can't make it all the way. And then the bike becomes like a burden rather than a tool. And so I love that idea of like another way to communicate what the joy and energy of working genius is in a different analogy.
And if you think about an electric bike, we talked about this, when you're going downhill, it actually recharges. Like in a car, when in a car, all these, the different models, EcoBoost or whatever else, you're going downhill and you get let off the gas and you see your battery charging. Well, when you're on flat ground, you're just pedaling. And when you're going uphill, it really reduces your battery because it's using everything. And so that's another analogy. Like sometimes it's actually extra benefits, not just going downhill that you don't have to do things that are hard, but it actually fills you up and gives you benefits that you wouldn't have.
Yeah, one other quick one, and this isn't just a list of analogies, but I think that it is helpful. And actually, I would say to our listeners, Pat, we'd love to hear the ways you guys have communicated this. Like, there's so many people who have been certified. We mentioned that last episode, like almost 5,500 people out there doing team sessions. I'm sure there's more ways that people have found opportunities to use analogies or communicate, the joy and energy behind working genius. But I've heard, I can't remember who it was from, so I don't know who to give credit to, but another one would be like when you're working out, your working genius is like the size shoe that you're wearing. If you have a shoe that is too that is just perfect, that's your working genius. You could do a great workout. If you have a shoe that's too large, you can actually still kind of do the workout. It just, you get clumsy and, flopping around a little bit. If you have shoes that are too small, that workout becomes painful and you're ready to quit as soon as you get an opportunity. And so that just another way, like imagine running in shoes that are too small for you, just not a possibility.
Right. And then we start getting into other analogies that we need to preface by saying this is not about working genius. They're just analogies. Like I have kids and 4 boys. And I remember that Laura, to go back to working genius, she doesn't have galvanizing. And I have it as a competency. And when I get them together and go, okay, who wants to do this chore? And independent of their working genius, just letting them choose, because it wasn't like they were that different. Like if it was cleaning the pool or doing or emptying the trash or doing the dishes, everybody had a different preference. Again, not related to their working genius. Mikey hates gross food. He has an aversion to like dirty dishes. So he would do anything to avoid that. But when I was a kid and my mom said, I want you to vacuum, I don't know if it's because I have OCD or whatever else, but I actually thought it was kind of fun. And ironing shirts is fun to me. My wife hates ironing shirts. So even in the mundane chores, independent of your working genius, some things I find that it's fun to think when I iron shirts and vacuum. And Laura likes doing dishes and figuring where things go. It's not and I've looked at this. It has nothing to do with me being an ID and her being a WI. It's just, everybody has different preferences. And sometimes it doesn't crush me at the end of that. But let me tell you, there's certain things that if you said to me, hey, you need to do this weekend, I would just be like, oh, this is going to be the worst weekend ever.
Well, and I actually I agree. We're not, you're more referring to the joy and energy and interest in something than you are the working genius. But I've loved the analogy or the story that you tell often on the podcast about there are actually ways you can go about chores or homework or other things where you can integrate your working genius. Like
yes.
you talk about your dad, the way he wanted you to mow the yard was like, okay, here are the straight lines, follow behind me and do exactly as I say. Whereas if he said like, hey, why don't you try to figure out a new pattern or a new way or use your invention? So there is a nuance there, but I love the idea of saying like, hey, yes, when we talk about joy and energy, there's probably a tertiary factor, which is like, you're just interested in the thing. Like you could be a WI artist and an ET artist, both liking art or and do it in a different way. But it's more about the interest in the activity that we're trying to draw the analogy of like, that's what it feels like when you're working in your genius is like, yeah, that sounds awesome.
And, the same happened when my boys were young and even when they were in high school, I'd come home and it would be like, the boys need help with their homework. Now, this is not based on working genius. It's just pure preference. The subject matter mattered to me. And if it was like math, I'd be like, yeah, I can do that. That sounds fun. That's all right. Spanish. Yeah, I can do that. But if it was something else, my wife loves poetry. Now, I'm an ID, she's a WI, so it's not like that different, our worlds. But I was like, yeah, I don't get that. I don't want to do that. Shakespeare, I'd be like, yeah, okay, I'm an author, but I don't get it, And she like, oh, I like Shakespeare. So sometimes it's just, for whatever reason, there's certain things we like to do that give us that, like, yeah, I'm not going to be all that tired after helping them with algebra. But if I have to like analyze iambic pentameter and all that kind of stuff for whatever reason. And again, I'm convinced that it's not working genius because that would be confusing if it were. It's just like sometimes things feed us and sometimes they don't. When it is working genius, it's pretty darn powerful.
Well, I think it does speak to, Pat, we often talk about like, okay, a marketing job is not a marketing job is not a marketing job. And then we try to deconstruct what they're asking based on working genius, right? Like, hey, we can actually give you a better idea if you will like that job or not based on your working genius. But I like this other layer of saying like, maybe you're not interested in marketing at all. Like, it could be. So I think there is a tertiary layer to this to say like, well, even if you were good at that specific sales job based on your working genius, but you're not interested in sales, it's not going to completely overcome your disinterest. And so I think that there is value in having this tertiary layer of interest, fulfillment, joy of the activity that you're doing that actually lends itself to your own proclivities.
I'm going to try one more lame analogy. We eat lunch together here in the office every day. And I don't even weigh in on it usually. And if they go, if I say, hey, what do we have for lunch? And they're like, oh, we're getting salad. I'm like, oh, the food of sadness. And it's like, lunch is going to be a chore for me. I'm literally going to go in there and just go, I'm going to take it off, and it's just work, and I don't like it. And and if it's something I love, lunch is fun, and we're going to be talking and it's like, it's not working genius. It's just sometimes certain things give us energy and joy, and certain things don't. And so I don't know what we're having today, but.
Well, I do have salad is a working frustration of mine. So I totally get that.
It's just, we love that t-shirt, lettuce, the food of sadness.
Yeah.
And other people are like, no, it's great. You don't understand. It's all, and it's like, see, that's your working genius. I don't get your working genius. I don't get salad, but I'm glad you do.
One man's trash is another man's salad. Right, Pat?
That's right. That's exactly right. So this whole idea of joy and energy is a beautiful thing. We all have different reasons why but it matters. It matters. And one day they will make something where I can have Mexican food and it'll stay with me and I can keep eating it all day long. That'll be like the bicycle with the battery or the cup that you have there that makes it hotter.
Yeah, I love they mix all the analogies. You're on a bike, electric bike, downhill with coffee cup and an ember mug. It's going great.
Eating Mexican food through an IV. There it is. All righty. Beyond the coffee cups. We went well beyond the coffee cups. And so that's a fun thing to talk about. Talk about it with your friends. Play this fun game at home with your friends and neighbors. And thank you for joining us on the Working Genius podcast. We'll look forward to talking to you next time. God bless.